Every system begins with a promise. Not a contract, not an obligation, a promise. Something better is coming. Something bigger is approaching. Something important is almost here. You see it everywhere once you notice it. Coming soon, new update, next release, upcoming launch, limited drop, future opportunity. The message changes, the structure doesn't. Modern life is surrounded by things that have not happened yet, and strangely, many of them feel more emotionally powerful than the things that already have. You check your notifications, not because something happened, because something might happen. You refresh the page, not because new information exists, because new information could appear. You look ahead, then ahead again, then further ahead. The future keeps generating attention before it generates reality. That is a remarkable system when you think about it. Most experiences require delivery before they can create value.
The future creates value before delivery ever occurs.
Anticipation arrives first. Engagement arrives first. Emotional investment arrives first. Reality shows up later, sometimes much later. And by then, something unexpected has already happened. Part of the experience has already been consumed. One of the strangest things I've noticed is how often the future feels more vivid than the present. Not because the future is real, because imagination has fewer limitations than reality. Reality eventually arrives with details, delays, maintenance, complications. The future arrives with possibility. And possibility is incredibly good at holding attention. That's probably why so many systems learn to sell tomorrow instead of today. For most of human history, value was connected to possession. You wanted something, you acquired it, then you used it. The transaction was relatively simple. Modern systems discovered something far more efficient. Ownership creates one moment of value. Anticipation can create weeks, months, sometimes years of value before ownership ever begins. A product launch starts generating attention before the product exists in your hands. A subscription starts generating expectations before the service delivers anything meaningful. An upcoming event can dominate conversations long before the event itself arrives. The future became economically useful, not because it delivers results, because it generates engagement. Every countdown creates attention. Every teaser creates attention. Every announcement creates attention. Every promise creates attention. The remarkable part is that attention often appears before evidence. The future does not need proof. It only needs possibility. Possibility allows imagination to begin working on behalf of the system. You start filling the empty space yourself. You imagine the experience, you imagine the improvement, you imagine the satisfaction. You imagine the version of yourself that exists after arrival. By the time reality appears, anticipation has already completed most of the emotional labor. The future becomes valuable long before it becomes real. That changes the entire relationship between attention and time. Systems no longer compete only for what you have, they compete for what you expect. And expectations are often easier to capture than reality itself. Once you start noticing this pattern, it becomes difficult to ignore. Entire industries seem to operate inside the space between announcement and arrival. The strange part is that this space often feels more exciting than the destination. Not because the destination failed, because anticipation had months to grow. Reality only gets one day to compete with it. The future became even more valuable when systems learned how to keep extending it. A product used to be released. Now it is announced, previewed, teased, delayed, upgraded, expanded, updated, and replaced before most people fully experience the original version. A movie becomes a trailer, then another trailer, then interviews, then reactions, then speculation, then countdowns, then release, then rumors about the sequel. The cycle begins again. The same pattern appears everywhere. Wish lists, pre-orders, upcoming releases, waiting lists, early access, beta programs, premium memberships. The modern economy discovered something important. Arrival ends anticipation. Anticipation keeps engagement alive. Once the package reaches your door, the countdown disappears. Once the event happens, the speculation ends. Once the product becomes ordinary, attention begins looking elsewhere. From the perspective of engagement, completion creates a problem. The system needs another future to replace the one that just expired. That's why modern environments rarely allow arrival to remain the final chapter. Every ending immediately introduces another beginning. Every release quietly introduces the next release. Every update quietly introduces the next update. The machine keeps producing future versions because future versions are extraordinarily effective at holding attention. The result is a strange psychological environment. You are rarely surrounded by what exists. You are surrounded by what is coming next. The future becomes the most crowded place in the room. I sometimes notice how quickly excitement changes direction. A product arrives, and almost immediately, conversations begin shifting toward the next version. Not because anyone planned it, because the system already prepared another horizon. The current thing barely has time to become present before it starts becoming old. That creates a strange feeling. Nothing stays new long enough to fully arrive. One of the most effective systems ever created is the countdown. A countdown transforms time into anticipation. It gives the future a shape, a location, a sense of inevitability. You can see it everywhere. Days until launch, hours until release, minutes until availability. The countdown performs a remarkable psychological function. It keeps attention moving toward a destination that has not arrived yet. Every glance at the clock reinforces the relationship. Every refresh reinforces the relationship. Every update reinforces the relationship. The future becomes measurable, and measurable things tend to feel important. That's why countdowns rarely disappear after completion. They simply relocate. One release ends, another countdown begins. One milestone arrives, another milestone appears. One target is reached, another target is announced. The movement never stops because stopping would create an unusual situation. Attention would have nowhere obvious to go. Modern systems are extremely good at preventing that situation. They provide another objective before the current one finishes, another promise before the current promise expires, another future before the current future becomes present. The result is a continuous state of anticipation. A person can move from one countdown to another for years without noticing the transition. The destinations change. The behavior remains identical. That's why waiting starts feeling normal. Not because it is temporary, because it becomes permanent. The strange thing about countdowns is that they feel objective. Numbers create a sense of certainty. 7 days, 3 hours, 10 minutes. But certainty is not the same thing as value. A countdown can make something feel important simply because it is approaching. Sometimes I think that's why the future attracts so much attention. It always comes with numbers attached. The present rarely does. The present simply arrives and waits to be noticed. Every system eventually encounters the same problem. The moment anticipation becomes reality, engagement begins to decline. The package arrives. The countdown disappears. The release becomes available. The speculation ends. The future turns into the present. And the present is a far less efficient generator of attention. The present has details. The present has limitations. The present has maintenance costs. The future has none of those things. Possibility can remain perfect because it has not been tested yet. Reality loses that advantage immediately. That's why arrival creates a strange form of economic gravity. Attention starts leaving the moment fulfillment begins. The product becomes familiar. The service becomes routine. The experience becomes normal. The achievement becomes part of daily life. The emotional spike fades. Systems learned this long ago, which is why so many modern environments focus less on satisfaction and more on continuation. The objective is rarely to create a final destination. The objective is to create another step, another upgrade, another version, another release cycle, another layer of anticipation. Completion creates silence. Silence creates reflection. Reflection can interrupt engagement. A person who fully arrives might stop chasing. A person who stops chasing becomes difficult to influence through future promises. That creates an unusual tension. Systems benefit when movement continues. Not necessarily physical movement, psychological movement. Attention moving forward, expectations moving forward, desire moving forward. The future becomes a renewable resource because it never has to remain present for very long. The older a product becomes, the more obvious this pattern starts to feel. The advertising rarely celebrates ownership. It celebrates what comes next. The next feature, the next update, the next generation, the next release. It's almost as if satisfaction has a very short commercial lifespan. Anticipation, on the other hand, can be marketed indefinitely. That's probably why modern systems seem so interested in maintaining it. Possibility is one of the most powerful forces in modern systems. Not certainty, not achievement. Possibility. A completed experience has limits. It happened. It can be evaluated. It can be measured. Possibility has no such restrictions. It can become anything. That's what makes it so effective. The future rarely competes with reality. It competes with imagination. And imagination operates under extremely favorable conditions. It removes maintenance. It removes inconvenience. It removes disappointment. It removes complexity. What remains is potential. Modern systems learned how valuable potential can be. Notifications promise possibility. Recommendations promise possibility. Upcoming releases promise possibility. Personal improvement promises possibility. The next version of your life promises possibility. Every one of these examples activates the same mechanism. Something better could be waiting ahead. The word could does an enormous amount of work. It keeps the outcome uncertain while keeping attention invested. The future doesn't need guarantees. It only needs enough possibility to remain interesting. That's why uncertainty often generates more engagement than certainty. Once an answer appears, curiosity ends. Once a result appears, speculation ends. Once the future becomes known, part of its power disappears. Possibility survives by remaining unresolved. The system benefits from that state because unresolved things are difficult to ignore. They remain mentally open. They continue consuming attention long after the original interaction ends. I think this explains why certain promises feel so difficult to leave behind. Not because they are realistic, not because they are probable, because they remain possible. Possibility creates its own gravity. It stays in the background, quietly asking for attention, quietly suggesting that something important might still be ahead. Sometimes that suggestion becomes more influential than anything happening right now. The future became even more effective when systems stopped treating products, services, and identities as finished states. Completion used to exist. A product was released, a skill was learned, a milestone was reached. Today, almost everything exists in a state of continuous revision. Updates arrive, improvements arrive, new versions arrive, additional features arrive. The cycle rarely ends. The language itself reveals the pattern: better, faster, smarter, more advanced, more optimized, more personalized, more efficient. The assumption remains constant. Whatever exists today is incomplete. Whatever arrives tomorrow will be closer to completion. The remarkable part is that completion never actually arrives. The update solves one problem and introduces another possibility. The improvement becomes the new baseline. The new version becomes the old version. The cycle continues. This pattern extends far beyond technology. Careers operate this way.
Personal development operates this way.
Productivity operates this way. Even identity begins to operate this way. You are encouraged to become a better version of yourself, then a better version of that version, then another version after that. Improvement itself becomes a moving target. The destination remains visible. The arrival remains distant. The future becomes a subscription model, not a place you reach, a process you remain inside. That's why modern systems often feel less interested in resolution than continuation. Resolution ends the cycle. Continuation extends it, and continuation generates far more engagement than completion ever could. One of the strangest observations of modern life is how quickly improvement becomes expectation. The thing that felt extraordinary a year ago feels ordinary today, not because it lost value, because the baseline moved. Then it moves again and again. Eventually you realize that the system isn't designed around reaching the final version. It's designed around remaining inside the update process itself. At some point, anticipation stopped being an emotion and became an environment. That's the difference. Most people assume anticipation is something they occasionally feel, before a vacation, before a promotion, before an important event. Modern systems expanded anticipation far beyond those moments. It became a permanent layer surrounding everyday life. Open any platform and the future is already waiting. Recommended next, coming soon, upcoming release, new feature arriving, your next goal, your next purchase, your next opportunity. The architecture is remarkably consistent. Attention is continuously redirected toward what has not happened yet. The future becomes the default destination of thought, not because anyone consciously chooses it, because the environment continuously encourages it. That's what makes the pattern difficult to see. It doesn't feel forced, it feels normal. The redirection happens gradually. A little anticipation here,
A little expectation there.
a little future-oriented attention everywhere. Eventually, a person begins living inside an environment where almost every system points toward what comes next. The result is a strange psychological condition. Arrival feels temporary, anticipation feels permanent, completion feels brief, expectation feels endless. The future becomes more familiar than the present because the future receives more reinforcement, more reminders, more prompts, more notifications, more promises, more encouragement. The environment quietly teaches the same lesson every day. The important thing is approaching. Not here, not now, ahead. Somewhere ahead. I think this is why waiting often feels invisible. Nobody experiences it as waiting anymore. It feels like participation. It feels like engagement. It feels like staying informed, staying prepared, staying connected. The language changes. The behavior doesn't. Attention keeps leaning forward. The future keeps collecting it. And because the process feels normal, most people never stop long enough to ask, who benefits from that arrangement? Every system has a cost. The cost of anticipation is not excitement. The cost is attention. Attention spent on tomorrow becomes attention unavailable to today, not destroyed, redirected. That's an important distinction. The present rarely disappears through dramatic events. It disappears through repeated redirection. A conversation becomes background noise because part of your attention is already somewhere else. A meal becomes routine because you're mentally consuming a future possibility instead. A quiet evening becomes invisible because it has been classified as a bridge to something more important. The moment happened, your attention only partially attended it. That's where the hidden cost begins accumulating. The future gains value, the present loses density. Experiences become thinner, days become harder to separate, weeks begin blending together. Years become increasingly difficult to distinguish from one another. Not because time accelerated,
Because attention fragmented.
the system of anticipation creates an unusual trade. It offers a stronger relationship with possibility in exchange for a weaker relationship with reality. Most people accept the trade without noticing it. The arrangement feels reasonable, productive, responsible, until they look back. Then something strange appears. Entire periods of life feel less substantial than expected. Not empty, not meaningless, simply thinner, as if the experience occurred at reduced resolution. That's the consequence of living ahead of yourself for long enough. The future receives the emotional investment, the present receives the leftovers. Eventually, the archive reflects the distribution. I think this is where the pattern becomes difficult to ignore. Because the future always sounds important, it always sounds justified. It always sounds worthy of attention. The present rarely makes that argument. It simply exists, quietly, without advertising, without countdowns, without promises. And maybe that's why it loses so often. Not because it lacks value, because it lacks a marketing department. The future promised a better life, a better version of yourself, a better situation, a better chapter, a better moment waiting somewhere ahead. The promise sounded reasonable because the future always sounds reasonable. It never argues, it never disappoints, it never arrives long enough to be evaluated. That's what makes it so effective. You were taught to believe that anticipation was pointing toward a destination. But destinations were never the most valuable part of the system. The anticipation was, the countdown was, the expectation was, the possibility was, the attention was. Every future generated engagement before it generated reality. Every promise generated investment before it generated results. Every horizon produced movement before it produced arrival. That's why another horizon always appeared. Not because the previous one failed, because the previous one completed its function. It captured attention, then it expired. A replacement became necessary. The cycle continued. The strange realization comes when you look back. The future never actually refused to arrive. Promotions arrived, vacations arrived, purchases arrived, achievements arrived, relationships arrived, entire chapters of life arrived. The problem was something else. Every arrival immediately produced another future, another countdown, another possibility, another promise. Attention moved forward before reality had time to settle. That's why so many people feel like life is constantly approaching but never fully here. The system was never optimized for arrival. It was optimized for anticipation. Arrival creates completion. Anticipation creates engagement. One ends the cycle, the other extends it. And modern systems have become remarkably skilled at extension. That's the uncomfortable part. The future did not become your destination. The future became your environment. And environments are difficult to leave because eventually they stop feeling unusual. They start feeling normal. Until one day you notice something strange. Life was never waiting ahead. Life was the thing being postponed while attention was looking for it. Maybe that's why the future always feels so close and so distant at the same time. Close enough to capture attention, distant enough to keep capturing it. Every promise leads to another promise. Every horizon leads to another horizon. Every arrival quietly introduces another beginning. The system keeps moving forward. The question is whether your attention moves with it automatically, or whether, for a moment, you finally notice where you already are. If Darkside Protocol helps you see the systems that quietly shape ordinary behavior, subscribe. Every week, we examine another mechanism hiding inside modern life. Not the headlines, not the trends, the structures underneath them. And if you want to understand how these systems feel from the inside, Punchline Protocol explores the human side of the same phenomenon. The ideas are human. The narration is digital. The interpretation remains yours.